Hello everybody, welcome back. If you were here for lunch, I hope you had a great lunch. If you weren't here for lunch, I hope you had a great lunch anyway. So I'd like to welcome back both our participants here in the room and our virtual participants. Before I start with the session with Lien and Rich Kick, I'd like to make an announcement from Daniel. Daniel says to our virtual attendees, all of you who have completed the survey, all 2 of you, please be sure to complete the evaluation both for the sessions and for the summit overall. These are really important to us in 2 ways. One we always talk about, which is in terms of getting good feedback about how to continue to improve, especially with this being our first event. And the other piece is that if you have no evaluations, it's hard to convince the wonderful people who funded it that it was really worth funding. So that's our plea to our virtual folks. So I'd now like to turn everyone over to our next set of speakers, Lien Diaz from the College Board and Rich Kick from Newbury Park High School in California.
Great, thanks, Chris. Thank you all for being here today. I really want to say that I'm very excited to be here with you today. I was invited by Chris Stevenson to be part of this summit, and just there's a whole lot of excitement around this, a lot of enthusiasm around making this computer science principles course an AP course, and I just want to say I'm very excited and very happy to be here with you today. I'm going to start off this next session with providing some just minimal foundational information about the AP program and related courses to computer science, and then talk a little bit about what is in development, what are in the plans to build some resources for teachers from a College Board perspective. And then I'm going to turn it over to Rich Kick, who is going to provide information about resources for teachers from a pilot teacher perspective, and perhaps also from a development committee member perspective as well too. So you've heard a lot about what AP Computer Science is already. I just want to reiterate, this is a new course that is being designed to help students explore the creative aspects of computing, to get them engaged in a different way of learning computer science, and approaching the study much differently than what we currently have now. We currently do offer an AP Computer Science course. It is called AP Computer Science A. Many of you might be familiar with that. That course will continue to exist. And when we launch this course, then the AP program will have 2 AP Computer Science Principles offerings for your students to take. Earlier, somebody had mentioned, I think Fran Trees had mentioned, that there is no sequencing that College Board will put forth, regarding these 2 courses. Schools and states and, your local districts will decide what that sequencing will look like. But essentially, these courses do serve some different purposes. So this course wants to excite kids. We're wanting to engage more kids. We're wanting to broaden participation across the board to get them into the study of computer science. And that is the second bullet here. It is designed to appeal to a diverse student population. The third bullet here, we want to assure that because this is an advanced placement course, students who succeed in this will be better prepared to enter and sequence computer science or STEM-related courses when they get to college. That is what advanced placement is all about. I mean, you can find this information online at the sites listed here. So I want to pause a little bit and just provide you a little bit of data and show, the perspective that College Board has on the state of the current state of who is taking our AP Mathematics and Computer Science exams. It's a lot of information here. I've listed the numbers for CSA, for Calculus A, B, and BC, and for AP Statistics as well. And when you look at the numbers in each row, what you're going to basically see is a compilation that provides a pie chart at the bottom of this slide that pretty much looks like the majority of students who take our mathematics and computer science exams are white. Very little Hispanic or Black and African American students take the exam. We do have a significant population of Asian students, but they are not considered underrepresented in AP. So this just kind of provides a little bit of context of why we're trying to develop this new course or launch this new course as an advanced placement course to really address the issues of engaging more underrepresented students in the study of computer science. In addition to that, this next slide shows the breakdown of male and female students who take our AP Math and Computer Science exams. So we have, a pretty good student population of females taking calculus and statistics, but that is not the case in computer science. And all of this information is publicly available. This was made available through the AP Report to the Nation. So now we get into this notion of broadening participation. And about 6 years ago, the College Board partnered with the National Science Foundation to develop a curriculum. I do want to give credit to the principal investigators who helped drive the curriculum, which is now being used by the AP Computer Science Principles Development Committee to develop the exam. That's Owen Astrachan from Duke University and Amy Briggs from Middlebury College. So this was a collaboration with experts in the field, both college professors and high school teachers as well, too, involved in the process all along the way to build this curriculum framework. So what we have now is an AP Computer Science Principles Development Committee. Like all of our AP courses, each AP course has a designated development committee that is responsible for developing the AP exam. And here on this slide, we list the names of those members. Rich Kick and Fran Trees are here. Dan Garcia is in the audience. Christina Gardner-McCune from Clemson University is not attending, but she is on the committee. Andy Kimmel is here, Deepa's here, and then Dale Reed from the University of Illinois is also on the committee. So again, a body of experts in the field with lots of teaching experience and a lot of expertise that is being provided to develop this AP exam. So I want to reiterate that there are some themes about this curriculum framework, this curriculum for AP Computer Science Principles, which is going to lead into some of the ways that we're developing our teacher resources. So the first theme is the curriculum provides a pathway for students, and we do say, in particular, for females and underrepresented students to consider studies in computing. A second theme or emphasis that you might continue to hear today is that we want to engage, the curriculum is engaging and it requires students to be creative and consider impacts of technology on society. We're going to ask them to create computational artifacts, to use a creative development process, to be creative in developing their artifacts. A third theme, which does differentiate this course a little bit from the current AP Computer Science A course, though programming is one of the big ideas, it is not meant to be a programming-centric course, a programming-focused course. But we do believe that programming is an important part of studying computer science, so we did include it as one of the 7 big ideas in the course. Just to reiterate again, we don't have a designated programming language for this course, so we are seeing an implementation of a variety of really appropriate programming languages and tools that is engaging students in studying computer science much differently than what is ongoing now. And also, last bullet, another main theme is that the curriculum focuses on computational thinking and fluency. Many of the presenters earlier today talked about the computational thinking practices and how that is really integrated throughout the curriculum. We feel this is another aspect of the curriculum framework that is going to help bring in that diversity into computer science. So this is a breakdown of the different components of the curriculum framework: computational thinking practices, big ideas, enduring understandings, and the learning objectives and essential knowledge statements. I mentioned this slide, I put this slide in here really to focus on how important each of these components are in the teaching and learning of computer science principles. Teachers who are teaching this course need to have an understanding of the different parts and how all of these parts come together. And more importantly, I will emphasize this in a later slide, is that the AP exam is built on or focuses on the learning objectives and essential knowledge statements. So everything comes together with the learning objectives and essential knowledge statements. So we have connecting computing, developing computational artifacts, abstracting, analyzing problems, communicating and collaborating as computational thinking practices. You can consider these as the skills that are integrated throughout the course. As the AP program develops teacher resources, one of the first things that you will notice is a deep focus on these skills in lessons, in our course planning and pacing guides, in our professional development even. We will emphasize or highlight the importance of these skills in those resources. And again, with the big ideas. Creativity, abstraction, data, algorithms. I mentioned programming is one of the big ideas. Internet and impact. So as we get into the different kinds of resources that are going to be made available to teachers, these are the major components or the major concepts that you will see in these resources. This next slide shows an example. It's a very drafty example from a prior version of the curriculum framework. This is what the curriculum framework looks like. And I want to say that the curriculum framework, which will ultimately become the AP CS Principles course and exam description, will be very likely your #1 resource as an AP teacher, right? So you need to become very familiar with this curriculum framework. And part of, or the biggest part of the curriculum framework is this section where you'll see 3 columns. The first column will state your enduring understanding. The middle column will list all of the learning objectives that are associated with the enduring understanding. And lastly, but not least, the last column indicates the essential knowledge statements, which sort of clarify or provides a lot more clarity into what students need to know based on that learning objective. It is not a document that many teachers are used to reading at first. I am emphasizing the need for teachers to spend time going through the curriculum framework, reading through each of the components, the columns in each of the big ideas, and becoming familiar with that as much as possible before engaging in, from my perspective, it really is important to engage in knowing more about the curriculum framework prior to engaging in other resources so that you can really start making connections as to what the expectations are for students in the classroom. That, again, that's from an AP perspective, College Board perspective. So in a nutshell, this curriculum framework brings together all of these components with your computational thinking practices, your big ideas, and your enduring understandings that have been used to develop learning objectives and essential knowledge statements. Again, reiterating that all AP exams, this particular exam, the questions will be based on the learning objectives, right? On the learning objectives and essential knowledge statements. So it's really important for you to become familiar with those. Okay, so I'm going to get into a little bit about the makeup of the exam. You heard earlier in a prior session or a prior discussion about the different components, the 2 main components of the exam. The first part being a computer-based exam with multiple or different types of questions that you might see on a computer-based exam. Single and multiple select, drag and drop. We looked at some grid questions. Fran showed an example of something that you might click on a grid with multiple, possible solutions. We want to reiterate that, we will provide examples of these questions in the course and exam description, so you can kind of get more familiar with those different types of questions that will be administered. The second part of the exam is a through course assessment, which are the performance tasks that we've been talking about earlier this morning. These performance tasks will come with some teaching guidelines, right? Some teacher guidelines, implementation guidelines. We don't have those finalized just yet, but just know that if you're an AP teacher teaching this principles course, you will receive some guidelines as to how to administer these performance tasks in your classroom. For example, and mind you, we haven't finalized these yet, but for example, because this is an AP exam or part of the assessment, we would expect that students would complete and create their computational artifacts individually, or as indicated in the performance task, to collaborate with another person. That is without teacher coaching or teacher interference, right? So those are the kinds of guidelines that we need to flesh out and provide to you once we have that. But you know, again, this isn't AP exam like any other of our AP exams. Students would have to complete these on their own. And then in the end, they will be scored. Students will submit their artifacts digitally through an online platform that we'll also have available in the next couple of years. And a scoring process will be conducted. Just like all of the other AP exams, we'll have a scoring process, and then scores will receive, students will receive scores online, just like AP CSA does. Okay, so what should we expect that is upcoming? First, I want to say that we will have an AP Computer Science Principles teacher community. So what AP CSA teachers currently have right now is an AP CSA teacher community. You log on and you post questions or you post statements or comments, and other people can reply to them. We're going to have the same thing for CS Principles. I'm hoping that we can get that launched sooner rather than later, maybe as soon as this fall, but you know, that is still in the works. Once this launches, this community is really basically open to anyone. You have to be a teacher, you have to sign up for it, you have to have an AP account, but pretty much anyone can sign up on this community. So that's very exciting. On this site, not only can you post comments or ask questions, but you can also share documents as well too. So we anticipate that this will be a place where resources will be shared, lessons, links, documents. You know, this will be that AP teacher online community for those of you who like to share online. And very important information as well too. Teachers who would be teaching this AP course will have to go through the course audit process, just like any of our other courses. So if you are currently teaching an AP course, say an AP CSA course, you will have to submit a syllabus for review. The syllabus will have to meet the curricular requirements. So for the course audit process, you will be given the curricular requirements. You will also be able to access the syllabus development guide that will help you develop your syllabus so that it will be authorized. We'll have 4 sample syllabi. Teachers can adopt the sample syllabi and use that to submit for the course audit as well. And then we'll also have a practice exam. And the practice exams are secured for AP authorized teachers. That means that if your syllabus gets authorized, you can log on to the AP course audit site and then access this CS Principles practice exam. I think that's it for me for this section. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions. And if not, we can, yes, sir.
I have two questions associated with the materials that students will submit. Like, so can you say like, what the artifacts are? Like, will they submit executable code? What other things might they submit? Related to that, will there be a rubric that's available to instructors for how those materials will be assessed? And I think the third question, will there be sample artifacts, like there'll be the sample practice exam where we distribute sample artifacts?
All right, so the first question was, do students have to submit executable code?
Or what else would they submit?
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
So obviously there are a variety of languages that the students can use, and that submission issue was discussed thoroughly over quite a few months. And it was decided that to allow everyone to submit something in a similar form, we're going to allow a submission of a PDF file, which if it is a text-based language could be a copy-paste and then convert to a PDF. But certainly if it's a block language, you're going to have to capture, probably a screen capture of that block or sequence of blocks, put it in a PDF file and submit that. But hopefully if you look at all the different languages that are being used, a PDF capture of that code should be accessible to everyone.
So they wouldn't submit like a YouTube video showing what their thing does? So it would have to be still in the curriculum.
We had that discussion as well. And it was debated whether or not that would be reasonable. And we certainly didn't want to burden students and teachers. We're trying to bring a lot of students in here. Hopefully students that have very little background will be included in this group. And those kind of burdensome processes were a big part of what we were using for our decision making. So we arrived at the conclusion that this was probably a nice compromise of what we'd love to see and what would be practical for people to submit.
From your answer, it sounded like you're looking at seeing source code, but are you also looking to see what the program produces when it runs?
So, yeah, ideally, we'd love to see everything. We'd love to see the code. We'd like to run the code. We'd love to see the results. Time-wise, it's going to be an issue for readers. We have a relatively new addition to our group. Paul Tiemann is our new chief reader, and he keeps us in the old reality check zone of you're going to have people come in and read this, correct? And how many months do you think we're going to use to read? We usually read within a week. So all of those issues had to come into play in terms of the decision making for what we'd accept and then how are we going to actually assess. So great questions, and it's kind of fun reminiscing of all the discussions we've gone through in this process.
Okay, so the other two questions were, what will be a rubric that will be given to students and teachers for how their submission will be assessed, and will you post sample submissions as resources to teachers?
So the question was, will there be rubrics and samples of student work possibly for teachers made available? The answer to that is yes. We are going to be piloting a rubric this fall that with pilot teachers, and so that will be made available as well later this fall. And the samples of student work is still not as defined yet, and the reason being is that what we want to be able to do is provide exemplars, right? And selecting those at this point in time is a little bit tricky because we're still piloting the assessment. So it might be that it'll take us another year for us to have those exemplars ready, but you know, it's certainly going to be worthwhile to consider having exemplars, but we just can't do it just yet.
You guys have expertise in evaluating portfolios from other AP courses, right?
So the question is, do we have expertise evaluating portfolios in other courses? The answer is yes. Currently, AP Studio Art has students submitting digital art, right, for scoring purposes. So we are learning a lot, or taking a lot from what we've learned and what we have in place for that course as well, too. Yes. So you have another question. We have an online question, and we have a couple of more questions in the audience. Did we answer all of your questions?
Thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll go to the online question from Deepa or Deepa.
This question is from Owen. Once performance tasks have been submitted, will the teachers then be able to review them and provide their own grade value for the purposes of giving a grade in the course?
Oh, and that's an excellent question. And that question was brought up at one of the sessions recently. Lynn, do you want to take the College Board perspective on this? So I believe it was discussed, and if I'm recalling the College Board perspective on this correctly, it is that it would be reasonable for a teacher to look at the submission and assess the submission, but certainly they shouldn't provide feedback / a grade for those students until they've already submitted to the College Board. So one of the hypotheses was maybe I could have a student finish early and another student finish at another time, and then possibly give grades to those students. It could influence other students in terms of what they did. So I think it was pretty much agreed upon that the guidelines would, and again, this is a hypothetical, probably recommend that they all be submitted before the teacher then provides feedback to the students in terms of what their grades will be. Is that okay?
Yeah, that was perfect. That was perfect. And, you know, not everything has been defined just yet, but certainly that is some ongoing conversation that, you know, we'll still need to be having. There's another question from the audience.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, go ahead and then we'll go to them.
Yeah, I presume that in all of your studies and analyses of the New College Board program, that you looked at the International Baccalaureate program and how they do it in England. I've taught in the IB program for 8 years, and they already have in place the video that you have to take of the kids' work. And in the IB program, the kids have to spend about 6 months on a thesis that they write. It could be like a 40-page program and 40 pages of documentation. They do that, and then they submit it. The teacher gives his own grade on it, and on everything, and then they have to make a 5-minute video of the program in operation. We did it this year for the first time. We had to make the video, so we just set up the video camera, and the student brought up the program and all the everything that went with the program, all the user interfaces, and we took the video and put it on a CD and shipped it off to England.
So is the question that are we familiar with the IB program and have we reviewed that?
Yeah. So
is that the question?
Yeah.
Have we looked at the IB materials and look at how they assess, and are we familiar with that?
It looks like they've got it in place already. I mean,
and the answer is yes.
Okay.
We are familiar with the IB program, and we are familiar with their assessment techniques, and I will let Lynn discuss the College Board perspective on that.
That's great. So I'm not the assessment person, but having worked with my assessment colleagues, we are definitely aware of, you know, different ways of assessing student work, and also, you know, the impacts that high-stakes assessment has, right, on what we're actually asking of students. The way that the AP program has been able to administer and score student work so far has involved a lot of research and psychometricians that have provided input into the best way to administer a high-stakes exam. So taking that into consideration, the way that we want to conduct, or the way that we want to administer these performance tasks right now is going to be more aligned to what we have with AP Studio Art, and also we're drawing from experiences with what is being developed from AP Capstone, which is a new, you know, AP program or new course that is being developed as well too. So we're trying to align, you know, the different aspects of different pieces in the AP program, knowing well that, you know, there are other ways to assess and administer high stakes assessment, but what we have in place right now, I think is pretty good based on the work that has been done so far in AP. We have go ahead.
At this time, we have another online question that people will moderate.
Chris Mayfield wants to know how much will be based on the computer-based exam versus the performance tasks?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure. About how much will be based on the computer-based exam versus the performance task?
Is that question referencing, I guess, the weightings of the exams? Okay, so so I think when we finalize the assessment design, which is, very stable at this point in time. We're going to see more weighting on the objectively scored part of the exam than we are on the performance task, but probably not by much. So right now, I think it's probably going to be 55-45, maybe, and we'll kind of have to wait and see what the final design is on that.
Just a side note, I see a development committee member with his thumbs going like this. I'm not sure if he means up or down for one or the other, but it's definitely still something under discussion.
Right. So, Dave, you had another question.
Well, I was curious, is the practice exam just going to be a PDF, or will students have the opportunity to use the actual testing interface and get used to how that works?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it would be great to have that interface available for students. So if that is the possibility, I think that's the way we want to go. I don't have the complete answer on, to that just yet. But certainly in phase 1 of piloting exams, we had an online platform that teachers and students had access to with a demo, that they went in and used prior to them having access to the pilot questions. So definitely something that we're considering. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next part, to Rich's part.
Okay, I'm going to discuss resources, and I'm certainly not attempting to discuss all resources for computer science principals, because there are individuals in this room that have incredibly good resources available, and they have spoken passionately throughout this conference and will continue to speak passionately about those resources. So I'm not going to try to show you all of the resources available to all of us. And hopefully the previous presenters have given you links to some of those incredible programs. What I'm going to do is give you a list of the resources that I provided to my students, and probably much more importantly, I'm going to provide you with a list of resources that my students have provided to each other and that my students provided to me. This course is a dynamic course that is very much student-centric, and when those students select topics that are interesting to them and share with each other, it inspires much more creativity, much more productivity than just the things that I would inspire them to do. So I'm going to try to give you those perspectives, and this is going to be a little bit of a virtual challenge here. We have the virtual world following us, we have the individuals in the room, and what we have in terms of my slide is a link to a live site. That link is something you virtually can go to and actually see the list that I'm about to refer to. But if you are here in the room and don't work through your computer, or virtually you just want to follow along, I can actually bring up a list of slides that I can refer to that just have screen captures. But we all know in this room, if you could experience these links live and interact with these tools, it would probably be much more exciting. But I think to compromise between the live and the virtual, it will be more of just a discussion of the different resources and what they can be used for. So when I click on this link, I see a site. If you virtually don't see the slide that I have in front of me, please use the link on my slide and go to that website. And what I have done, and I have to do true confessions, while one of the previous sessions was taking place, I screen captured all of the different resources that I wanted to discuss today, and I put them in PDF form, and I put the link onto this Google site. So when you look at the link that says Slide for CSP Summit 2014, that just occurred moments ago. So you could click on that link and see all the different resources I would like to discuss. You can also just go through the list that I have on this website and actually interact with these resources as well. So I'm going to start by talking about two of the resources I use primarily for my course management. One is Piazza. Piazza.com is something that was introduced to me by someone near and dear to me who has been a leading light in this project, and that's Owen Astrachan. At one of the meetings decided to use this for our interactivity, and I was so inspired by it that I brought it to my students, and they just ran with it. So it's a course management system created by a student who was relatively shy in class and wanted to be able to interact with her peers without having to stand up and talk in class. So Pooja from Stanford created the software and shared it with her classmates, and now has shared it with people throughout the world. And now my students can interact with each other and interact with me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without having to stand in front of the class. So it's been an outstanding tool. Another tool that I use on a daily basis is Google Sites. So I have a link to the drive, and in my Google Sites I have on a daily basis, my students have access to a doc that they created day one, through which they share their journal with me. So on a regular basis, they journal typically about 3 questions. What is it that we've done that you found inspiring, that you found that you were very good at, you were successful at, you really enjoyed doing? The second question is, what did you do that you found rather challenging, that you didn't necessarily find success in, or you just didn't enjoy it, it wasn't fun for you? And then finally, what did we not do that you thought you would really enjoy doing? And on a regular basis, usually a weekly basis, I will read those journals and try to get a better perspective on what really is working, because I know as a teacher, I always believed I understood what my students were doing. But when I read those journals, I actually began to know what my students were doing and what really was successful and what was not. So those are the 2 course management links that I use. And now I have this very large list. Again, I went through this Piazza course management system for my last 3 years of pilots. So I looked at all the things I shared with them, and I looked at the things they shared with me, and I've created basically in this 10-point font 12 screens of links. So obviously we don't have time to do them all now, so I will just discuss a few. I've grouped them based on what I thought were primarily creativity links, abstraction links, data links, algorithm links, programming links, internet links, and impact links. But as I emphasize to my students, none of these topics are isolated to one big idea. Every one of these links and every one of these resources could be used to discuss any of the 7 big ideas. So I almost think there's this fractal nature involved where everything is collected in the one image. And as you zoom and magnify, you may focus on one little aspect, but you find all the other aspects are there as well. So that's the general philosophy of how these are organized. So I'm going to first of all look at one of the artistic resources. In particular, it was the sketchy link. And one of my students actually found this. It's a website called Mr. Doob, and I went, what is this, D-O-O-B? I see a person who works for Google here shaking their head saying, yeah, this is a cool site. A person said he used to wear headphones constantly. And if you look at headphones, you have a little bulge on one side and a bulge on the other side, and they said, you know, it looks like D-O-O-B with the headsets on there, so they called him Mr. Doob, and that was now the website, through which they saved incredible tools. And students used to draw little sketches with lines. But this individual who created this site said, why limit yourself to lines? You can draw with fur. You can draw with circles and rectangles. You can draw so as you intensify your motion, it widens or reduces. It's an incredible creative tool that I glanced at one day and saw John Lennon appear on the screen because one of my artistic students was using this tool to sketch these amazing things. And I remember going back even to the early 80s where my students would be sitting in class and while they were working on things, got inspired to create artistic work. Well, now they have tools to digitally create these and share them with their peers. It's an incredible resource. I see that we have an online question, so I'll pause. Deepa, share that question with us.
This question is for you, Rich. It's in response to your query that you put out there. What category of resources in which you are most interested? Alex Booth asks, creativity, keeping it open yet focused so that it's productive. Do you have resources that will help with that?
Yeah, so it is so open-ended in terms of the directions you could move for creativity. that what I try to do through our journaling, through our discussions, usually Socratic dialogues, I try to find the thing that captures the imagination of the students. So year by year, I may spend much more time or much less time on a particular creative outlet depending on the group of students. And so you'll see, if you look through my Piazza classes, an incredible emphasis on 1 to a 1 year, and then the next year maybe not as much. So one of the things that has inspired my students over the last 2 years is the all-school art show. And now I use tools to create artistic works digitally, because that has not only captured the imagination of my students, but also the surrounding community, the entire school. So every year, the tools that we focus on are basically student-driven and student-inspired, rather than something I would pre-plan and say, you all must do this. So I'm going to continue with the next creative resource. This is something called Weave Silk. Is there anyone in the room, or virtually if you want to respond there, who has worked with a symmetry brush? I saw 2, 3 hands. I remember in the 80s having software that would allow you to create symmetry brush artifacts. And now these symmetry brushes are so much more powerful, more creative. And again, I did not find this for my student. My students found this for me and said, hey, I want to be able to produce with this kind of tool. And that's what they started using in class. I have not even touched on a fraction of the creativity tools, but hopefully at your leisure, you can look through the remaining collection of links and explore some of those and hopefully find things that will be useful for you. The next slide I have is specifically associated with abstraction. You'll notice that it's a much smaller list. That doesn't mean it's not out there. It means that most of the students didn't get inspired to share with me abstraction links. But there are certainly, on the web right now, so many resources available to give you information about bitwise operators, binary. What does a bit really model? What does an operator model? And look at circuitry and looking at those different levels of abstraction. Those kind of resources are available to a much larger extent than we've ever had them before in computer science. Here's one, which is a YouTube video. There are outstanding YouTube videos provided by a wide variety of institutions, very respected professors. Here is one in particular on transistors. What is a transistor? So this person has a very entertaining yet very knowledge-packed video on how transistors work, even down to the atomic level. So very impressive stuff. If you go to the next big idea, we're talking about data. Again, a very, very large collection. If someone asked me 3 years ago, what do you use for data? I would have a very small list. But after 3 years, I found that very, very many students found data that was interesting to them. Some of it didn't necessarily meet the requirements for the creativity PT, but because that creativity the create PT, because that create PT is no longer a required submission, we can now work with whatever data set we want and really use the student inspiration to do some things that they find to be beneficial. I kept saying create, which is our programming, explore, which is the impact, and investigate was our data. So I apologize for the misspeaking there. So the investigate is no longer something we're going to have to submit. Therefore, they can use all these data sets. For example, my students, for some odd reason, are very much into the entertainment industry. I'm not quite sure why. It's like 30 miles down the road, and they enjoy looking up things about movies and music. And so they can actually take this text file of the top 1,000 films as rated by this particular source. And then they can actually write code to filter and extract information from this data and then hypothesize, and then maybe even take other data sets and see if there's relationships between the films, the dates that they were released, and maybe other things in society that were related, see if popularity had anything to do with those particular movies. I do see that we have another online question, so I'll take that before I go to the next slide.
This is a slight segue from what you're speaking right now, but a good time to bring this up. Figuring out the right amount to teach in abstraction, algorithms, and programming. hints on languages and frameworks would be nice. Alex Booth. So he's trying to say.
I'm going to refer to one of the artifacts that a student created. We had discussions on creativity. We threw out the term cookie. And obviously, computer science kids thought a cookie was this file. But many of the kids not having a computer science background thought a cookie was a very tasty treat. But then we started discussing what cookies were, and it was amazing how cookies are not real easy to pin down. So we have discussions on things that students are familiar with at the level they're comfortable with, and then we try to raise them to other levels of abstraction. And then we'll talk about abstractions associated with computer science, and we talked about cookies in terms of computer science. This so impacted a group of my students that they made a video on abstraction. Talk about creativity, it absolutely blew me away. So if you go to the very bottom of our collection of slides where it says in PHS creativity, there's one on abstraction, and it's narrated, and it is a video production that's impressive. So I look for the students to see where they are and try to take them from where they are to the level at which I would like them to understand abstraction in terms of computer science. So I am going to hopefully rather rapidly finish through these slides because I can see we have about 13 minutes left. The next data example was just something from the New York Times. It's a relatively small list, 365. What are the most popular birthdays? You know, I've taught statistics. I know in normal math classes people have discussed, well, birthdays, you know, everything's equally likely. You have a 1 out of 365 chance of someone having a particular birthday. But you look through that New York Times article and you find there are some days, actually a day one away from my birthday, that is the most popular day of the year for birthdays. And there are other days that are much less popular. So if you look at the rankings and say, what is the least popular day on which someone is born? And maybe have speculation and maybe do data searches to see if they could collaborate their speculations. This inspired a lot of good discussion on how you can use data to grab information and process it to, well, where they would actually produce new knowledge. Again, I apologize, all these discussions could go into much more depth, but I'm going to try to pick it up and make sure I finish all the topics. Algorithms, there are many, many discussions now about algorithms. In popular culture, you'll just hear people talking about algorithms. Here's something about face recognition and how these people who are on the top and the bottom image, the same people but have very different expressions, how would you write software to relate to those two expressions and verify they're the same person? The algorithms associated with that kind of face recognition are significant. Here's something that's been rather near and dear to my heart in recent past, all the medical software that helps to cure people. In particular, MRI scans have tremendous algorithms associated with them. They take that data and how do the algorithms then impact the results, and they're bringing in new algorithms to make those scans much more effective. If you now go to programming, there are many, many resources out there. I've tried to show you not only the resources that are available to me, but certainly the resources available to the more popular languages that are being used in CSP. There are snap links and Scratch and Blockly and JavaScript resources, Python resources. Hopefully all those have been included. And certainly as I go through the year, I will continue to expand this list. So if I didn't put something on, I will try to catch it and bring it in later. Here's one specific example. I use a site that was created by Nick Parlante, Stanford University. It allows me to introduce JavaScript to students in a very friendly environment, non-threatening environment. It's simply a web page that allows students to enter code within a text window. When they enter that code, they click a button and it actually interprets the JavaScript and produces the output right there in the same web page. Students can go through Nick Parlante's examples and have an incredibly rich experience, but they can also go outside of the examples and do things like I have there, a fractal image that they can produce using the same window that Nick produced for his exercises. So this is, to me, an excellent way to introduce my students. in a motivational way to introduce my students to programming. Here's another example, a Blockly site that is produced by Google that's constantly in development, expanding, but I like the ability to do the drag and drop, create the graphics, which my students find very appealing, and then convert into JavaScript so they see the code that's actually behind the scenes to this drag and drop environment is something that they can actually write in as well in the other site. If you look at the internet resources, again, internet is basically something they're using on a daily basis. They're inspired by it. So if you look at one of the motivational resources that they found, I had seen it years before, but I really didn't present it to them. But one of the students said, hey, have you seen the archive site? Archive.org will allow you to go back and see websites that you thought were long gone. So I took the Newbury Park High School website and said, look at the site in 2000. And now look at it in 2002 or 2007, or look at it today. They can actually see that website as it evolved throughout the decade. Well, they can do that with a lot of sites. So when they think, oh, I put something up and now I take it down, they have to be understanding that there's data out there that's persistent, that are stored on servers, and they can actually go back and see previous versions of websites. They found that pretty fascinating. This next one is a site on packets. It's specifically provided by PBS, and it is an internet resource that allows you to dynamically go through and learn about bits and transmissions and packets, and it's a very informative and motivational site. And then finally, Impact. The list was so large that there's no way I could really do it justice, but a couple of the things, certainly the Gutenberg.org site, that allows students to have access to literature that when I was in school I could never see. Only the books that were in the school at the time could I read, and now they could go and find just about any great work of literature on this free resource. They also have something called fit.fraunhofer.Deutsch, which is, I believe, German. I apologize for all this German-speaking people here. I just butchered that whole pronunciation. This is a specific site associated with cancer drugs, interactive software that simplifies research. My students seem to be very motivated by software that helps improves people's lives, and these are the kind of sites that they've found and shared with others to discuss impact of computing. And here is just a little slide I stuck in that I referred to earlier. This is a screen capture of the video. They actually were using a rolling pin, and you would think they were rolling out the dough, but they weren't. They reversed the video and they rolled in the terminology they wanted to discuss. So they reversed it. So even though abstraction was gone at the beginning, they undid it and showed abstraction, showed different terms popping up, and they had the whole cookie theme going. It was a very creative video, so I highly recommend that you see that video. And so and here is the last one. I had a video by a student who did a creative approach to the internet and the concepts associated with the internet, and it looks like just a regular screen capture of someone drawing, but they did the high-speed drawing so that it animates it very quickly, and you see them draw a tremendous number of concepts very rapidly. They show them building a Huffman coding tree and encoding, decoding, so it was something they found a creative way to discuss some of the concepts we talked about in the course. So that is basically my list of, probably too long of a list of resources, but hopefully you'll find time to find the others on the site on your own. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have a few more minutes to take some questions from the audience and also from the virtual audience as well, too. Okay, Diva, why don't you start us off with one of your questions?
Okay. Bruce Schwartz says, I see EarthCam on the internet slide. I used to work for them. I'm curious how rich students use the site.
Sorry, what was the site?
EarthCam.
EarthCam. So the question, I don't know, did they hear the question over the virtual site? So the question was about EarthCam and how did my students use it. We had a discussion about technology and the positive and negative impacts of technology, and we had students create a debate on whether they would argue for positive or negative. And one of the sites that was brought up was EarthCam, where they debated that they could be watched at all times. They have cameras all over the world. I can see the penguins in the zoo down in San Diego. I can watch people in Times Square. But that to me is a very positive thing. To this student, they were rather upset that someone could set up a camera and watch them on a daily basis go through their entire day. So I used that specific site, and again, a student brought that site up as a tool to discuss some of the positive and negative impacts of technology. But certainly, I never want to say that what I do with it is what should be done with it. I can think of so many different ways that could be used, and hopefully you as creative teachers will find something that would be valuable for your students as well.
Okay, other questions from the audience? Chris?
Lynn, my question is, from your view of managing this entire project of getting this course off the ground, what's your sense of the thing that has most surprised you about the process?
So it's a great question. The question is, what has most surprised me in the process of developing this course and preparing to launch it? By way of background information, my prior experience is not based in computer science education, so I was learning along the way as well too. It was a surprise and also a pleasure to be working with this community who has found a way to unite and come together in support of this project and development to broaden participation. And you know, I coming from the outside into the computer science education community, that is really a nice thing to see. It really is. And it's not just, you know, college board staff. It's not just college folks, although they really helped in this process as well. But it's really teachers, you know, who have said, we want this in our classroom. How can we spread the word? How do we get our principals on board as well? And, you know, just educators from all different levels and different organizations coming together to make this happen. I hope that answered your question, but from my perspective, that has really been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I'd like to also comment that we've had many courses in the past where, honestly, the inspiration seemed to come from competition. Someone did something that was really cool. We should do something that was even cooler, and back and forth. And it was inspiring for some, but it was kind of a turnoff for others. This community is inspired, I think, by sharing and providing things to make computer science better. It has been one of the most collaborative, inspirational groups I've worked with, and again, as Lynn said, it's all different levels. It's high school, it's college, it's organizations, groups, individuals. It's an inspiring group, you know, with which I'm proud to work.
Okay, last questions or comments? So I want to thank Rich for helping to put together this presentation as well too, as he's been piloting and working on the development of this course for quite a long time. All of the resources will be made available online as well too, and feel free to contact me after the summit or, you know, during the day today, and Rich by email or Twitter. I'm happy to have continued conversations with you about this course. Thank you very much for your time.